Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome back to the Let's Digital Pharma Summit. We've had a great discourse since morning and taking this momentum further. We have industry leaders talking about COVID-19 implications for pharma R&D, building for the next normal. I would like to welcome Dr. Arani Chatterjee, Senior Vice President, Clinical Research, Aurobindo Pharma Limited, who will be moderating the session. Joining him for the discussion, we have Dr. Rakesh Bhasin, Vice President and Head R&D Formulation, Biocon Pharmaceuticals Limited, Bangalore, and Dr. Jayant P. Dave, President, Indian Pharmaceutical Association, Gujarat State. Welcome to all the panelists. Dr. Chatterjee, over to you for initiating the discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon once again, everyone. And at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this panel and also for asking me to moderate this session. And it is my pleasure to have with me the two co-panelists. And I will ask Dr. Rakesh and Dr. Jayant to introduce themselves briefly in addition to what was told just now. Dr. Rakesh?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dr. Chatterjee. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rakesh Bhasin. I am heading R&D formulation in Biocon. So my responsibility include the formulation, analytical, clinical, and also pharmacovigilance part. So I am responsible for overall delivery of this program. So I think I'm looking forward for this discussion today. Over to you, Dr. Jayant.
Yeah, so good afternoon to all of you. I'm Dr. Jayant Dave. I have two affiliations with the industry as well as the academia. I work with so many SMEs over these years as an entrepreneur, as technical person, as a consultant also. And presently also, I'm working with a firm called Apostle Remedies as one of the founders. And I'm connected with academia for the last 15 years. And presently, I'm working as adjunct faculty at LM College of Pharmacy, Ahmedabad, and also at Graduate School of Pharmacy, GT. So I have both industry and academia affiliations, and I work more with these SMEs, but I have tried to keep in touch by my own reading and interest.
Thank you both for the introduction. So let us move on with the topic of today's discussion, which is building for the next normal COVID-19 implications for pharma R&D. So when we say, building for the next normal, we should first look at what has changed. So what was the previous normal? How has it been affected? What are the implications, if any, for the R&D? And what is the next normal? And only then we can be clear on how we can build for it. So if I were to rephrase this statement, what we need to look at is there any crisis? If so, how can it be classified? Short term, mid-term, long term. And then what we need to look at next is, what do we need to do about it and how do we recover from it? So with these initial thoughts, I would like to invite Dr. Rakesh to put forth his views on this topic of the panel discussion today. Dr. Rakesh.
Thanks a lot. I will share my presentation. Please let me know if you are able to see that. 1 second.
Yeah, I can see the presentation.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So as everyone know that today our topic is COVID-19 implications for pharma R&D and building for the next normal. So when COVID started, we were all wondering that it will only impact our supply chain, and all organizations in India and abroad were, trying to get material from whatever sourcing they were doing from China. But then it always suddenly struck. And then unknown virus has, turned into a pandemic throughout the world. And then the pandemic accelerates, and we know that multifaceted pandemic spread throughout the world. And of course, then medical countermeasures were also taken. So this was something unprepared situation for all of us, but it has a implication on pharma. So today's discussion is mainly on pharma, how it has impacted. So when we are seeing pharmaceutical R&D, so initially, there were three potential horizons, when pandemic started, what need to be done, because very important programs were running out, mainly clinical programs, multi-million dollar programs were there for many of the organizations. So first, for as a leaders, what was the criteria that to resolve the immediate crisis. What is the immediate crisis and how to get through that, and then how to have a charting a recovery plan with the resilience and return, and then what is the next normal. So we'll be discussing about these aspects, how organization have gone through that. So when we were thinking, this was I think a survey done by McKinsey, and they have surveyed throughout the world, and most of the R&D leaders in all organizations said that they were spending around 40 to 50% of their time on crisis management. So it was apart from their normal work. So whether it was lab working or on-site or manufacturing site or working from home, so many things need to be taken, like even if it is lab working, so all people cannot work at the same time, and personal protective equipment were designed, and there was a system designed for safe distancing, and all employees, all scientists were, temperature recording was done. And of course, this was a crisis time. So mental support and insurance was also done for all colleagues. And when we are talking about on-site manufacturing site, so there also similar type of precautions were taken, personal protective equipment, safe distancing, and work with minimal number of people. And then priority product, like which were really required for say COVID or life-saving products. So they were given priority, and then a whole plan was revolving around that. And then some of the colleagues who can work from home, who are working on laptop and they don't work in lab, so they were given opportunity to work from home. And again, this was like understanding new work life, because generally home is considered to be sit and quite relax. But when it was a working from home, I understand even these were extended working hours, like maybe start early in the morning and calls were going through late in the evening, and then embrace digital change, because everyone was not having a laptop or other provisions. So that organization have done that digital change and online monitoring part. So this was like resolve the immediate crisis. This is what happened when a pandemic started, and this is the overall scenario of the the pharma world. So implication of restrictions were very different in different locations. Some part of globe were affected more, some were worse, some were slightly okay. So then there was site-specific, hospital-specific regulation. US and EU have different regulations, and then the US has also come up with their own regulations and have tried to give some liberty in the terms of guidelines. They have issued a number of guidelines which helped in revisiting protocols, clinical protocols. And this is something the survey was done by First Biotech. They have found that around 41% of new clinical trials which were started in 2020 or which were there in 2020, they were like put on hold due to this COVID-19 pandemic. And 41% of those delayed trials are now starting in 2021. And around 65% of trials will continue remotely after pandemic. This is based on survey. And 57% of organizations say that cost of running a trial has increased significantly after the pandemic has begun. And then 49% of organizations are saying that time taken to complete this trial is more after this pandemic has begun. So remote monitoring is challenging but possible, and this is a quite possible solution as of now. And this can further reduce visit, save time and money, and patient safety. If one adopt telemedicine, if medicine can be dropped at patient's home place, then this can also be taken. So these are the immediately resolve criteria. And then coming to charting of recovery, so resilience. So it is gradual, of course, and with some restrictions and persisting longer than others. And it has to be in a staggered way, as some geographies recover faster, some were still in peak, and extended return to new normal. So developing a recovery plan for restarting trial, when to start, and what type of regulatory challenges need to be addressed. So this is what is the recovery plan in most of the organizations are doing right now. And building agility into trials, both in flight and post. So when we are saying the recovery phase, then hand to hand with resilience. So site-specific measures, patient, we have to support patient in terms of transport. If in case it is not possible to deliver the medicine or trial is of such that it has to be injected, then transport has to be arranged. Site visit, window extension, e-consent. So all these measures has to be taken. And then equipment and financial assistance, like personal protective equipment when patient comes from their home, or home nurse visit, or mobile blood truck, online assessments, ratings, and telemedicine consultation. So these are the new which is coming up in recovery phase, and finding out new opportunity to do same thing differently, right? So, and then revisiting the current portfolio, like I was explaining, as in manufacturing also, priority was given, like which are life-saving medicine, they have to be given priority. And similarly, we have to revisit, or most of the organizations are revisiting their current portfolio also, like how they have to prioritize that part, because all clinical trials which were there, it cannot be 100% on track. So one has to prioritize their work and then revisit their current portfolio and design accordingly. So this is like a new normal, redesigning, collaboration, and predicting. Redefining business continuity plan. So we have to prepare ourselves, although it looks very minimal that it is not going to come back, but we never know. So we have to prepare for the next disruption, find out where we have failed the last time, and what corrections need to be done in terms of protocol designing, or in terms of precautions, or in terms of screening parameters. So this is what we have to refine our business continuity planning, and create greater resilience in sourcing models, and rebalancing research work by CROs across countries, clinical supply chain diversification to minimize vulnerability, so that there's no stoppage of clinical supply. Continuation of what norms we are following right now. Physical distancing has to be there, that restrict in-person interaction and access to health facilities. Do things differently, but without compromising the safety of patients and employees. So this is new normal, which we have to redesign. We should not say that no, pandemic is over, no, everything is normal. This is the new normal now. And then redesigning workplace and workforce while meeting individual needs. So in the future, it is essential to find ways to keep workforce feeling emotionally connected to, no matter how they are, whether they're working from home or they are on-site, off-site, wherever they are, they have to be connected emotionally with the organization and with the programs. And fostering a sense of belonging among employees, ensuring that innovation is not lost in a purely virtual environment. So that is something leader has to take care of that part. And by deploying better remote collaboration and toolings, and good network and cloud computing and better infrastructure should be given to employees, so that they can work remotely. And reevaluating the need and role of work campuses, looking for new ways to maintain culture and drive innovation. So innovation, say in R&D organization, in pharmaceutical organization, it is innovation. So that has to be the top priority. So it should, and has to take care that it is not lost during this virtual working program. So a hybrid, like a more supportive commercial model has to be worked out. Sometime work from home, sometime they have to come in the office. So this is, I think, a hybrid model will be more appropriate in the current scenario. And a new type of collaboration when we are talking about new normals, and clinical trials reshaping and research and development. We have seen ourselves in that rapid development of novel vaccine was done, within very short period of time, which demonstrate that it is possible. In this streamlining and efficiency is indeed possible, and if regulators also provide the support, so definitely all those multi-year trials can be squeezed to some extent wherever it is possible. In our own examples, in our organization, we started a trial of itolizumab, which is biological products. So within short time, phase 3 was completed and it was launched in the India market, and it has proved effective. But at the same time, some of the normal generic programs which suffered a lot, like suffering in the sense patient dropout. Say if we are planning a study of say 60 subjects or 70 subjects, and if it is like 4-period study, so dropout was quite high. So we were ending up with say 50% of a total evaluation available data. So in that case, sometimes power was an issue. How to continue that, because as per FDA guideline, you have to use same RLD load and you have to continue with the same protocol. But then it was a learning for all of us. We also approached FDA, and I am sure other organizations must have also approached FDA. And so what was advised to us that whatever you want to do, build a provision in the protocol so that even these drop in subjects, you are able to further extend that arm. So of course, that was for further, this was a learning for all of us, and we have included that additional pivotal arm in our protocol proactively. But it comes with a cost, because you have to then arrange all reference product, all test product, and logistics related to that, so that even in 5% cases where we have to go with additional arm, that in that case we should have sufficient reference product, sufficient test product to do that. So I mean, this pandemic has given a lot of learning to all of us, and this has to be continued, because this may be a new normal. We never know when some surprise will hit us. So, and more trials will be hybrid trials going forward, a combination of in-person and virtual visit. So that's what is the need of the hour. And of course, costing has gone significantly high when pandemic was there. So screening criteria were more stringent, that RT-PCR test has to be done. In some of the trials, we were doing RT-PCR, some additional testing like XR, X-ray of chest. So all these have added to cost, and CRO have increased their cost by say 40%, and they have passed back that cost to sponsors. So in that case, yes, it has become an expensive program, and it is also coming from McKinsey survey that most of the organizations are saying that yes, timeline has increased and cost has increased. But I believe that this is probably new normal, so we have to live with that, and we have to design our programs considering all these facts. So with this, I will just end my presentation, and we can further continue our discussion during this time. Thank you very much. So
thank you, Dr. Rakesh, for a very succinct presentation, if I may say so, where you have covered almost all aspects. But I think the problem goes beyond what we are discussing, and I would like to invite Dr. Jayant at this point to give his perspective about the challenges that the pharma R&D is facing and what needs to be done to overcome the same. Dr. Jayant. Dr. Jayant, you are on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee, and thank you, Dr. Rakesh, for a nice introduction. This COVID pandemic has been an absolutely unique experience for mankind. And as everybody knows, it is one of the greatest tragedies since the World War II. So it has been a very great, as you say, learning experience, a great experience for science, a great lesson in terms of innovation, a great lesson in terms of collective partnership. So many new things mankind has learned. And as far as this topic is concerned, that initially, whatever research work was going on before the COVID, that was in all the areas of basic research and new product development. And everything suddenly was put to a halt And the focus was only on developing medicines which are for COVID or supplementary medicine. That was the immediate focus. And the development of the regular products was put on the back burner for various reasons, which were stated here. But some of the changes which have happened, are such that they are going to remain for a long time. And some of the changes which have occurred, I say, are very natural. It would have occurred even otherwise. The COVID has expedited, the increased use of the technology, everything was in any case going to come. The entire COVID episode has expedited the COVID. So it has been a very, although a very sad moment for the mankind, but it has been a very great learning experience. If I just say briefly, that the COVID, I will not want to repeat what Dr. Akeshi has said, that the whole preparedness in terms of start with resolving and resilience and then this organization, that's very fine. I just want to put the other things in perspective right now. As far as COVID is concerned, it has affected the healthcare sector as a whole in a big way, of which pharma is an integral part. It has affected healthcare facility. So many limitations of the healthcare facilities have come into being. We can see so many of these incidences of fire taking place in ICU units. Then the healthcare infrastructure also was not adequate. That has also been come to notice. The medical devices and equipment, that is one area. Then the diagnostics. There never was so much of emphasis on diagnostics as we have it today. Because when there was no treatment initially, then how you diagnose, either using antibodies or using antigen. That was a new learning experience for most of the people. But I think diagnostics has become an absolute limelight, which was not the case before COVID. That's one major thing, change which I think has happened. Health insurance is one thing. And one of the most important things which we are going to talk about today is about pharmaceuticals and biologicals. That's our core subject today. Now, COVID-19 affected the pharma industry in so many ways, right from continuous supply of the medicines and supply chain, then the increased technological use, safety and well-being of the employees, enhanced supply of the therapy. So how industry responded to that? So there were challenges. So the first thing the industry did was to supply, what was necessary for the treatment of COVID. So in that case, even the products like paracetamol, this prednisolone, how useful they were. So those things were maintained. Then emergency use authorization. This has been one of the biggest landmark or the changes which you have noticed in USA, in other countries, that rather than waiting for absolutely perfect things, we can go ahead with what is good. So that has been a very phenomenal change. And so-called this emergency authorization for medications like Favipiravir, Remdesivir, Itolizumab, and those liposomal lymphodepletion, these are all again manufactured by industry. Nothing new, but whatever was there, that was streamlined. And these were, and ultimately CGMP compliance also is in place. Along with the research and development, once we have got more approval worldwide, we need CMP compliance facilities whereby the medicines can be manufactured. If you make headway in research, but we don't have the GMP compliance units, the products which are manufactured cannot be, approved cannot be manufactured. So that was one thing. COVID-19 has affected pharma industry in so many ways, right from negative impact on production, demand, finance, supply chain. And the main change, as Dr. Akeshi also brought about, the challenge, that was in terms of clinical trial. I read somewhere in this Sun Pharma's annual report that in the year 2020, 2,000 clinical trials were either terminated or suspended. That was the biggest bottleneck. And out of that, 50% of comments with the improvement in the situation. And as he mentioned, that the clinical trials which were put on halt, in some segment like gastrointestinal, inflammation, infectious disease, respiratory infection, 100% trials were put on hold. In some segment like CNS and rare disease, partly they were put on hold. And in case of cardiovascular and oncology, clinical trials were more or less not interrupted because that was considered to be very useful. So this was the little negative part, but the positive part, as again was mentioned now, this remote access monitoring, telemedicine, these are going to be the new normals, and virtual clinical trial, as they say, has been really one of the very important developments of this COVID. So that is what we can see on that. Then there has been, along with the industry, there has been a matching response by regulators also. Because not only emergency authorization, but if you look at the India in 2020, it is 29 new drugs were approved and 17 supplementary new drugs, which similar to 505B to some small changes, as in case of dapagliflozin VC. Initially, there was approved only for diabetes. Now there is approved for congestive cardiac failure and this kidney disease, this kind of things. So these the changes which has taken place. And likewise, in case of USFDA also, normally about 40 to 50 products are approved as NDA, but in this case also 53 products were approved, and out of which 66% contributed to small molecule pharmaceuticals. So it is not that biologicals are completely going to take over. Small molecule pharmaceuticals have their own value, and that is what we saw during COVID treatment also, that only few biologics were in limelight, and the plasma therapy, everything which was there ultimately was discouraged. So small molecule pharmaceuticals are very important, and they have to continue to play a very important part. At the same time, government also has shown a great deal of sensibility for the healthcare and health, And apart from this very popular production, this incentive PLI scheme, so many other financial incentives government is also granted. And it's only because of the collective effort and support of government industry that whatever development that we could see in case of COVID has taken place. So the shift is basically to a certain extent change from competitiveness to collaboration. This is one of the important change that has taken. Formerly, every company will want to have its own data, own patent, and everybody will be competing each other. And now the world realizes that unless and until you get together, not only with the industry, among the industry, but even with the allied industry like IT industries also, and the government, and only because of the collaborative effort, we have been able to tackle this pandemic. So this is one of the new lessons, and this has to be new normal. That business, okay, is of course there, but we have to strike a balance, that between outsourcing and as well as becoming self-reliant. So that is one very important thing which has taken place. Now, just some more time I want to take just to say a little bit about the history, this size of the pharma industry, so that the impact of some of the factors can be understood, especially some of the students who might not be more aware about the size of the pharma industry and how India has got advantage compared to the rest of the world. So that will become more clear. Just to say in brief, global pharma industry today is about $1.3 trillion, which is $1,300 billion. Correct, and that is expected to grow at 3 to 6%. Maximally, that can grow up to 7%, and which can touch, about 2.150 trillion by 2027. And this is because new products which are traditional, as well as new therapies, cell therapies, novel treatment for the rare disease, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these are the factors which are going to drive that. And more spend by R&D. 10 big pharma companies, I read in Sun Pharma report, that they are going to increase the spending from 83 billion to about $96 billion. So everybody has realized, and these are some of the positive things. As far as India is concerned, out of this $1,300 billion, India contributes something like $41.7 billion. So which will be only 3% in terms of value. Whereas if you look in terms of volume, we are considered as third. And we account for 10% of the production of the unit. So this particular bridge has to be kept. And I think this COVID is one of the factors which is going to provide incentive towards that. So we can just look at this particular thing, that how this particular, we have been a very lead player in generics. So that is from the generics, we have to go for incremental innovation in terms of complex generics and biosimilars. And then finally, you have to go for innovations in terms of development of new chemical, new molecular entities, as well as new products. So how this particular whole thing can be done, and what are the drives in which where this COVID has particularly affected. So 3-4 segments are there. We can just briefly touch upon them. So that will summarize the whole influence that has taken place in R&D. The first and the foremost change which has taken place in terms of vaccine. So, there was no treatment of vaccine was the earlier thing which people had to go about. So the entire world, the entire scientific community, academic community, everything was put behind the discovery and this development of the new vaccines. Just because we had the knowledge about the other viruses, these MERS, SARS, and we had some leads about the genes, so that, this immediately vaccine development could take place. Normally in the past, never, this development, so suddenly the clinical trial takes place. So because of the earlier experience that we could go early in terms of vaccine development. And India, this not only that so far we're manufacturers, but this Covaxin, this Bharat Biotech and ICMR, that Covaxin vaccine development has also been one of the lead progress. So we are both ways good in terms of developing a product as well as in terms of manufacturing. Because manufacturing is as important as discovering. And today also, with so much of development, WHO has very recently stated that so many poor countries, they are still not able to access the vaccine. And that is why they regard this giving third dose of the vaccine as completely meaningless. So both ways we have played part. Now, just look at it from the scientific angle. As of today, WHO, has approved 8 different kind of vaccines for emergency listing, correct? So that any country can use it. In that particular segment, the earliest technology which we had, this whole inactivation of the virus. So this Sinopharm, Sinovac, and Covaxin belong to this category. Then this adenovirus vector, which also is a known platform for vaccine development, wherever AstraZeneca, Covishield, this Janssen of J&J and Sputnik, have been able to develop product. And finally, the biggest change or the new thing which has happened is the development of the mRNA-based vaccine. This is for the first time, that mRNA-based vaccines have been developed, and this Pfizer and Moderna, they belong to this category. And the annual report of Sun Pharma, which I saw, they have mentioned that this $6 billion, $4 billion turnover can take place in the coming year. So huge volume also in terms of that vaccine. And this Novavax, it belongs to protein subunit. So 4 different platforms are there. So vaccine development has been one of the greatest satisfying thing about that. And it has brought new science also. And this mRNA-based vaccine, not only for COVID, but all different types of therapies, including chronic illness also, is going to play a key part. So this is one of the very important things. The second part is in terms of small molecular weight drugs, which are commonly called as pharmaceuticals. As I said, that out of new drugs developed by US FDA, 66% becomes this small molecular weight category. Correct? So, and the supplementary new drug, that's very good thing, like, that supposing we have got this sitagliptin, and now we have got phosphate, now we have only sitagliptin, and that becomes a new drug as far as 505(b)(2) like that. So some incremental ways. And another most important development or the most satisfying thing which has happened about this COVID is repurposing of drugs. And there's a long list of drugs which I do not want to read right now. Only if time permits, we'll see later. But developing a new drug or a new product has its own challenges. But then working for a drug, for a new indication based upon the science and everything that we have. This has been a phenomenal development. This proteinage software, everything. So great deal of biological targets are there. So this development of new drug per se is good, but repurposing is also an equally lucrative kind of a thing, and there has been a great success. So this trend definitely is going to continue, that people will look for repurposing of drugs and will be able to arrive at new drugs and new products in near future. As far as biologics are concerned, there is no escape from there. In India, we call it new drug also. In case of US FDA, that is classified under new biological entity. And this tocilizumab and some other these monoclonal antibody drugs in the later part of the COVID, when you got this severe inflammation, what was called cytokine storm, at that time they have played a very useful role, and that is the future. Today we are not ready. As far as India is concerned, maybe we have to think in terms of biosimilars. That also is a kind of NDA, but biosimilars is the best thing which we can look for right now, advancing from generics, and then we can slowly go for development of new biologics development. So these are some of the things which are there. And as I said, India already was, since the patent rules change, was looking for development and enhancement of their R&D. But COVID has expedited in some way. It has given some new leads also. And as I said, this incremental participation by IT also, that is also very, this machine learning and all these things is also helping in a big way. Virtual clinical trial, repurposing of drugs. These are some of the things which I think are very important. And most importantly, there has been a change in the eyes of regulators. They are also looking for facilitating the industry, having interaction before the products are approved. And rather than looking for a foolproof product, have a product which may have marginal risk, but then you are able to meet with this immediate needs. So I think that regulators' approval and regulatory change also, I see as one of the biggest positive fallouts of this development. And as I already said, collaboration is the word. Competitiveness will stay, and that has to stay, but it is supplemented by collaboration. So these are some of the things which I have observed, I have noticed. I just tried to put in a nutshell how, although it looked a big tragedy for the mankind, it has opened up some new avenues for research and development and manufacturers.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. If the, Dr. Rakesh's presentation I described as succinct, yours was indeed comprehensive. So I want to focus on, one particular aspect of this. So this pharma summit is being held, under the banner of ELET's Digital Pharma Summit. So there is the digital word built into the summit. And Dr. Rakesh has already described some of the areas where adopting digital methods have helped, particularly in the clinical trials. But I think this can be extended beyond clinical trials into the preclinical area, the formulation, into supply chain, into development. So I would just like to invite your thoughts on how digitization we also have a broader theme which is running, Digital India, covering other things like digital payments and so on. But how can adopting digital way of life help us building a new normal for the pharma R&D in particular, not just in clinical trials, but in other areas? So would you like to give us some thoughts about this? Maybe Dr. Jayant, you can once again start.
I have not thought much about the ways that digitalization can help in R&D. I have not directly been a part of that. I have seen is in terms of general, like for example, telemedicine is something very important. Patients, during COVID also are afraid of meeting each other, and telemedicine was happening in a big way. So this is one of the very good implication of the digitalization which you could see. And this telemedicine and that kind of thing is going to continue. And there has to be a lot of use of digitalization as far as this manufacturing is also concerned, correct? Because now we see that this physical documentation largely is replaced by the electronic records and everything, which is independent of COVID, because otherwise also purely from the point of environment, if you consider from the point of exhaustive work that is considered. So this review is also quite easier. I've seen some of the clinical research units when I was working for that ethics committee, that company called Lambda. And there was not a single paper was there. They said the entire documentation is digital. Even when, except that whenever they take the patient's consent, for participation, that is the only form which is physical. Rest was digital. And same thing we see in industry also, that our quality management system, as we see, that all this deviation, change code, everything will write to hand and everything is digitalized. All kind of documentation is digitalized. Very easy for a person to review also. And so many, these data integrity issues were there initially. They were also overcome by this digitalization. See, for example, I saw in some company where I used to work as supervisor, just as a consultant, that whenever quality control records are there, somebody who is reviewing, he might just put a record. But now with digitalization, unless until you log in, you will not be able to do it. So unless you actually do it, you cannot do it. So all data integrity issues also which were there, apart from facilitating, also will be taken care of. And there are, I think, a great deal of tools also in terms of development also. As I said, Schrodinger also, I just was reading about the Schrodinger software details. And they say a great deal of things they can do which they are not formally able to do before. And I'm not quite sure about other ways, but I'm quite sure in terms of R&D as well as in terms of manufacturing and finally clinical trial supply chain, digitalization is the way out. And there is no alternative to that. The sooner we do it, the better it is.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Jayant, with you, right? So, in fact, of course, digitization is anyway important for any organization, but this COVID has triggered that thought process. So, probably here also, starting from, say, a purchase order. Earlier, we were, scientists were giving purchase order manually or putting the entry. Now, our company has, find a way that we have to just put that and automatic purchase order will be released. So much automation has happened, right? So, in that sense, and of course, it has been translated to lab also, like you were mentioning, electronic lab notebook, and in manufacturing the EBMR. So all those have triggered and accelerated actually, in fact. So we were planning, say, in next 2 years, 3 years. No, we have thought, no, we have to prepone, say, in the next 6 months, we have to get all those implemented. So I think a lot of work has been done in digitalization in most of the organization, including us. And even from regulatory perspective also, earlier they were coming, for inspection here, and some of our approvals were pending. So we were requesting them, either you visit us or, what is the way forward. Otherwise, our product will not get approved. So they have designed both Europe also as well as US. They have designed remote interactive evaluation. So we have, done that. So companies also are learning how to put all those cameras so that they want to see the operations, each and every operation, how it starts from dispensing, how it is manufactured. So I think it is a very, very huge learning experience from both sides. Yeah, right, definitely. Of course, it comes with the, some cost, additional cost, but this is the only way forward, right? Like it. So
So is it done for only GMP compliance, or it is also done for new product approval? Is virtual audits are done?
Right. So GMP, mainly GMP compliance, because they will not approve it unless they have approved that facility. So sometime, what happens, one product is of different category. So they want to visit again, although they have approved it earlier, but they've approved product wise. So it was stuck for some reason, and then again they have suggested we will do a remote interactive evaluation, and it is a very good thing actually. Without visiting, they will monitor there. They will try to adjust your time also, and in that way, it is very cooperative from regulators also, and they have given all fantastic guidance in this regard. Yeah.
Yeah, so in fact, Dr. Jayant, now, even that consent process also has been digitalized. So there is an e-consent tool available now, and people are using that. And of course, digitization has helped in documentation and communication. Yeah, these two things definitely they are there. I was actually, trying to stress more about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and those kind of things. So, maybe I'll just mention a couple of things which, in fact, I had come across. So Pfizer, for example, developed something called a SDQ, Smart Data Query Tool, which offers an exceptional level of data quality and minimal discrepancies to resolve in the final stages. Because of which, in their COVID-19 vaccine clinical trial, data was ready to be reviewed a mere 22 hours after meeting the primary efficacy case counts, which normally take more than 30 days. So a work of 1 month has been reduced to 1 day for the patient data to be cleaned up. Then IQVIA has developed AI and ML based tools and systems for prioritizing the highest potential sites. So when you are selecting sites, this will help you in informed trial operational planning choices, depending on areas where COVID-19 outbreaks are most likely to occur, based on the epidemiology. So that's another way. Then Eli Lilly has adopted a cloud-based process which allows sites to enter and track pre-screening information. So then, if more patients are being screened out than expected, then they can re-examine and update the enrollment criteria. And this not only helps reduce the time required to enroll patients, but has also informed decisions about where to open new sites for trials. And then the University of Liverpool used a testing platform called Agile, which is a clinical trials platform that can test new drugs for COVID-19. And it's again, artificial intelligence. So it's a proof of confidence engine, what they're calling, that can treat patients for the first time with promising drugs that have been developed around the world. And it is capable of testing multiple potential treatments in parallel and speeding up testing by pooling control data across patient groups. And the first drug that was trialed in Agile was an oral antiviral drug from an American company. So these are also, some of the things, since, the theme of this summit is digital. So how, digital technologies were used to accelerate R&D in the new normal. I have, one interesting thought going around in my mind, which I want to share with you and ask how you feel about it. Any industry, any R&D is dependent on talent pool. And that talent pool comes from people who are passing out from universities, medical schools, other higher institutes of learning. And this is one area which I have found has been very badly affected, like many other things during this, pandemic, where actually I have heard firsthand from my own classmates who are now in teaching positions that final year medical students have had online practical examinations, where instead of working out a case, they have been given a kind of a case study, and they have answered that theoretically, and then on the basis of that they have passed. Same thing must be happening everywhere. Engineers are working on maybe virtual models. Architects are designing things on computers. So how is this going to affect? Is this going to affect, first of all, the industry, not just pharma, any industry, and R&D in particular, in the coming days? Because today or tomorrow or day after, these people are going to join the workforce, and they would have spent maybe 2 years of their career, especially those who are in advanced stage of learning, purely in a virtual mode and on theoretical mode. So is that going to be a constraint, and what if do we need to do something about it? If so, how can we overcome this potential challenge that at least I personally feel? Dr. Rakesh, any thoughts about this?
Yeah, exactly. So it is very like a fine balance actually between this virtual world and actual practical. So somewhere we have to find a balance, right? So it cannot be totally remotely training of all students or institutes. So I believe balance has to be there, and with the improvement in situation in India and also elsewhere also, probably this will be improving, and they will be able to adapt. But if we talk about the theoretical part, so even I have seen my kids are also doing online these classes. So definitely that is their part. But actual practical, when it is to be done in the lab, so that will give you a different experience and different excitement altogether. So something, yeah, it is missing. But I think considering the current scenario, probably some few more months one has to bear, and then again they have to be in the field and go to the actual lab and do all those experiments. Otherwise, one way extreme of both sides are bad. Like somewhere we have to balance. Otherwise, right. So now I have seen that institutions are opening up now. So it is good encouragement, and it is required actually. Right? We cannot be still remotely. Of course, digitization is good, but it has to be used, with experience and knowledge, and it cannot become total virtual, because this is science, and science has to be backed by experiments and learning with experiments and doing some failures and actual learning. So I know that it's a tricky situation, but yeah.
Yes, Dr. Jayant, being a person with so much experience, more than anything else, how do what are your thoughts on this?
See, like any other thing in life, we have got pros and cons both. Here also there are some good sides, there are some bad sides. Just talking of a negative thing first, like as Rakesh ji said, this both academia as well as research has definitely been compromised, because the way you teach one-to-one, in fact, you take tutorial classes also once in a week to see that if there's any particular gap in understanding that you can drop, those things never happen. Even when you are teaching in a class, when somebody is facing you, at least you can see that a person is hearing you. When I just take a class, I need just one person who is listening to me. Then I can speak. Even others are not listening, I will not mind. I need one person, then only I can speak like that, So you can look beyond the eyes. You can see to the heart of a person and you can talk. So that definitely has missed. As far as research is concerned, there's definitely a big loss, because so many good projects which were given to the students, they could never be completed. The final examinations also were held online. they could do only 10 to 20, 30 or 40% of the work which they would have done otherwise. We also sacrificed in terms of research publications also. We could not do what normally would have taken place. So this definitely has been a missing side. The positive side, what I see is, the world has become more closer. Just as we are able to meet so easily today and take part. I've never seen so many companies coming out with so many webinars. Like, the ISP, you talk, or all pharma companies, in abundance are available. So if there's a will, there's a way. If somebody really wanted, it could also have been seen as an opportunity. Otherwise, you will never be able to have so many. As I said, this in any case was going to happen, but that was expedited. And so many things available on YouTube, so many things. Although there is a little gap in terms of comprehension, but nevertheless, the number of avenues which are available are far and wide. So many technical seminars, everything has taken place. And sometimes, when you don't learn with a real life situation, even hypothetical thing or a case study can also help, although with a little compromising. And I always believe if you don't have the base, have the next base, third base. But we should do whatever best is feasible. So it has seen both the sides. The one who has taken benefit of the digitalization probably would not be so much at a loss. And the one who has taken casually would certainly, be missing the link.
True. So we have about just under 10 minutes left, and I wanted to touch upon one more thing which is very important, which is sustainability. Because ultimately, what we are doing today has to sustain us tomorrow and the day after. So in this new normal and this pandemic situation, which is still not over officially, WHO has not declared it over. It's better than before, but we cannot forget about it. So what is it that pharma companies need to do to sustain themselves, and how can R&D contribute to it? Because since we are focusing on R&D, there are many other things, maybe manufacturing, supply chain, and so on. But let us focus on R&D. What can R&D do to contribute to the sustainability of pharma industry in this new normal? Dr. Jain?
Yeah, so I think, anyway, so I'll just say something. What I believe is, every industry has to, or every academic institution for that matter, has to work out its plan, what is best for that, As far as SMEs are concerned, they can think in terms of being a good manufacturing house. They can think in terms of developing good generic products. Those which are developed companies already have had good number of generics right now. The first two generics also, India is the first more than US, but they can think in terms of complex generics. I feel we have always been behind in terms of biological products, because now it is not pharma, it's biopharmaceutical industry, So something also has to be done about that. The beginning has to be made somewhere. Most of the people are afraid of, taking a lead somewhere. So I think that biopharmaceutical area, of course, it is more cost intensive, everything, but somewhere, there has to be government plan, policy, some guideline has to be there where some kind of beginning can take place. Today, even after passing everything, normally people think in terms of pharmaceutical. So something in terms of biopharmaceutical also we should try to do. Because that is the only way big companies will be able to sustain. Yesterday, I was listening to that one webinar by CRISIL, where some of the lead industry people were there. And they said for them, filing, say, 100 numbers of A&D, all that, that's not going to give any great benefit to them. They will definitely have to think in terms of complex generics, biosimilars, NCs and NBs. Only then, they can keep a pace with the globe. So we have to keep a pace with the globe. See, in a small company, for example, simple things like herbal, which we did not incidentally mention during the normal discussion, the herbal products, immunomodulatory products also. Any small company can do that. And some people have been able to do that. In fact, Sun Pharma developed one particular product as phytopharmaceutical, which did not go beyond that clinical trial phase 2. So whatever is feasible in terms of resources, in terms of an intellectual capital, what best way it can be capitalized, that should be seen. And one more thing which can be done is the off-neglected area is academia has never been involved with serious research activity with the industry. I think there's a great deal of potential. I don't see any good reason why this should not happen. If it can happen in the developed country, it can definitely happen here also. The students have good intellectual acumen. So, industry can find out. Sometimes, SMEs particularly, they are afraid of sharing their problem with academia. But there has to be some kind of openness, some kind of interaction. So academia aligning with the industry can be one more way where this research can be made more sustainable and more productive.
Dr. Rakesh, your thoughts?
Definitely right. So actually for any development in R&D, there are two environments, right? Internal and external. So I believe internal environment, still we have some control, like, scientists who are working in the lab, So we have better control. We have done zoning, like, shift-wise working to avoid all those things. So that has worked very well. But external environment, because R&D work doesn't complete till this go to different phases or even bioplans or whatever part. So their control is a little less because that is something external environment which is beyond control of any R&D. So as a cumulative, yes, programs are getting affected because of whatever constraints are there. But the next normal or what can be done is better control of internal and strategy for finding risk for the external environment, what can go wrong, and how to address those risks based on this learning, designing the protocol so that at least tomorrow if we go that trial has been stopped for whatever reason, every regulator should be able to accept that with, if we have already given those provisions. So I believe that, with all these combinations, with the whatever strategies, risk mitigation strategies are there, we should be able to be there. Yes, there will be impact on our program. It's not all program has been 100% within timeline and within budget. But yes, with all this learning, I believe that we can have a better risk mitigation strategy and can deliver program fairly to the good success.
Well, we are close to the end of the hour. So at this point, I would like to ask the elect team of Garima, Raj, Raman, are there any questions for the panelists?
No, sir, we haven't received any questions. So if you want to conclude the discussion, you may please.
Well then, hopefully we have covered, if not all, at least most of the challenges and opportunities, the corrective measures that pharma R&D needs to take in this evolving situation. I would like to once again thank Dr. Rakesh and Dr. Jayant for being available for this panel discussion, though we had a very small panel, but that allowed us to have a very focused discussion among us. Thank you, LH Pharma Technologies once again.
Sir, yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhasin, Dr. Dave, and Dr. Chatterjee for your in-depth insights. We are grateful for your presence at the ELETS Digital Pharma Summit. And just to sum up, day one of the summit saw deliberations on how adoption of digital technologies helped pharma companies during the pandemic, and insights of pharma CIOs on creating new business processes by embracing automation. We would like to thank all our esteemed speakers for taking out time from their busy schedules and sharing their thoughts with us. I would take this opportunity to inform our guests and audience about the upcoming 3rd ELETS Diagnostic Leadership Summit in New Delhi on December 14th. This will be an in-person event, and we would like to extend an invite to everyone present here. And before I close this session, Dr. Chatterjee, Dr. Bhasin, and Dr. Dave, please accept a small token from ELETS Digital Pharma Summit for your presence and insights that we received. So this is a virtual certificate from us to all of you. So Dr. Rani Chatterjee, this is for you. Thank you so much for your presence here and for moderating this session. Dr. Rakesh Bhasin, for your valuable inputs and expertise and your insights upon this interesting topic. And of course, Dr. Jayant P. Dave for giving us such detailed inputs. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your presence. And we hope to have your presence on day 2 of the ELETS Digital Pharma Summit tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.
Very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee.
Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.